So I guess we'll start with, obviously you saw DC twice this season. You saw Arlington once. Um, all three games you had success passing the ball. For a while there, I think going into that St. Louis Arlington game, we had said that the Renegades had the number one pass defense in the league at that point. You guys didn't have too much trouble in the pass game. DC obviously had a good pass defense at the beginning of the year and then kind of tailed off as the season went on. What did you see? We'll start with DC's defense. What did you see from a Greg Williams scheme? Obviously, they love to rush six, especially on third downs. They play a 4-2-5, right? And they like to drop the safety. What do you see from them that Luis Perez can maybe take advantage of in his fourth time starting against DC this season?
Yeah, with DC, I was looking back at my notes and just kind of remembering those games, but 98% of the time, whatever you see pre-snap is not what it's going to be post-snap. So you can't get caught up in the pre-snap. You want to see, what they're lined up in, because a lot of times what they line up in pre-snap tells what they're going to get to post-snap. Greg likes to play a ton of cover two on first and second down if you get some yardage. Now he will also blitz if he has a positive play on first down. He has no problem blitzing on second down, and then third down he's going to play a ton of man, especially if it's third and short. He loves playing man coverage, whether it's just bringing five, maybe bringing six, but he likes playing man coverage. I think with them, he's going to bring cover zero, right? Like he does it all the time. He's going to bring pressure. If you, as a Arlington offense, Luis Perez, if they can burn cover zero, Greg gets out of it. I don't know if you'll have the clip, but we're playing at DC the first game. We had it planned, and they went cover zero, and I ended up checking to what they thought was going to be a max protection deal, and we knew, hey, the safety's going to basically, we call point the tight end, and when the tight end blocks out, the safety green dogs blitzes. So he sees the tight end block, and then boom, he's the add-on guy. And we ended up acting like we were going to block, and then Jake Sutherland slipped, and I hit him. And so we checked to it. After we hit him on that, he never got in cover zero ever again. I mean, it was kind of crazy how different he played us the second game because of us burning him in the first game multiple times when they did bring pressure. So I think his mindset changed of, all right, well, I'm not going to put myself in situations like the second game. They played us a ton of cover two. It didn't matter what down and distance it was. He was going to say, hey, we believe that, St. Louis is not going to be able to run the ball well enough if we play just our base defense, cover two, and then let's don't give up the big play. Let's try to keep everything underneath, and let's rally to the football and make tackles. And when he plays that way, he causes you as an offense to have to play very patiently and not force any throws. And Luis Perez has to be that type of quarterback today, and just take what they give him.
Yeah, so we broke down Perez pretty heavily in our preview episode. I don't know how much of that game you got to see between Arlington and DC week 9. Obviously, that was when you guys had a huge one against Seattle following it. He seemed very comfortable. I think it was probably one of his best games of the season. He was in command of the offense with about 5 minutes left in the game. They're down by 11. It seems like they just went into 2-minute. Luis, that was his second start in Arlington, and he was directing traffic, knowing where everybody should be. Tempo was real fast, and he was able to lead them to a 17-point fourth quarter comeback and end up forcing overtime. The Arlington offense that you guys saw first half of the season was a little different.
Yeah.
they were trying to find a balance, but they just didn't have it for whatever reason. At that point, they were struggling offensively. Bringing Luis in, obviously different team. When you guys played them, you would have played them twice. I guess the first meeting, I don't know if he went most of that game or if it was Brett Hundley, from what I can remember. I think he maybe came
in DC. I mean, in Vegas.
Yeah, the way he started the game, right, and then they brought Brett Hundley in.
Yeah, they brought Brett in basically the second half.
Right,
but he started the first half.
I think that was Luis's last game in Vegas.
Yeah, it was.
Now, just kind of watching some of him, and you mentioned in our interview, liking to see how the quarterbacks will talk and how they lead a drive down the field. The Arlington offense, talk about their balance and maybe some of the things they do different from you guys and what their best chance is to score points in this game.
Well, Matty, I'll tell you the craziest thing. I was talking to Bruce about this whenever Arlington played Houston. Arlington literally took our offensive game plan, and I love Coach Hayes, but I think we played, I would say, Houston from one of the best standpoints from an offensive game plan against their defense. Really took advantage of how they play, and Arlington literally did exactly what we did. I mean, we were sitting there watching it, and it was like they'd run a play, and it's like, daggum, like that's the same play we ran against them. So I thought against Houston, they looked like a completely different offense than some of the schemes they had been running. And now they're a West Coast offensive scheme team. That's where Coach Hayes, that's his background. He was with me in Cincinnati during my time there. So he comes from the Jay Grudens, the Hugh Jacksons, that tree. And so I think, you have to be able to run the ball and establish a run against DC's defense. Like you have to, because then it takes pressure. Now it makes Greg think, all right, do I sit back and just keep playing this cover two, or do I drop down and now we have to mix up and get more guys in the box? Because Greg relies on his front seven, his box guys to be able to, hey, I can rush four a lot of times, and I know my guys up front are going to get pressure on the quarterback. I know my linebackers are going to be in the right spots to make tackles when it comes to the run game. So I'm fine to give up 2 yards here and there. Like where he starts to overthink and get into some things that they're not used to is when you do hit some big runs on them. And now he has to play some different deals and play a lot more man, which he doesn't want to play a ton of man throughout the whole game. He likes playing zones. He likes being able to show one way, spin, and bring another. So I think Arlington has to establish a run game, take pressure off Luis, and if they can do that, then it comes down to, all right, Luis just taking what the defense gives you, even if you have to end on a punt. Like if you can end every possession on a kick, it's not always bad. And so hopefully, for their sake, Luis can do that, and their offensive scheme can, be well for him.
Yeah, he's definitely a very prepared quarterback. And when you give a prepared quarterback a fourth try at a team, I can only imagine some of the things that he's cooking up, especially after that Houston game. I noticed a moment late in the DC game against Arlington week 9. It was late in the game. They're driving to try to tie the game. They got the 4th and 15. It's now 26-23. They had 2 timeouts because the clock management from Perez was phenomenal. He was not going to take a timeout unless they needed to do so. When they did finally call a timeout, I think they're inside the 10-yard line. He comes over to Chuck Long and he says, I don't want to throw the ball here. And they're trying to call a pass. He's like, if you see it open, take it. If not, throw it away. Perez is like, I don't want to throw the ball. He ends up running it out of bounds. They get the field goal. So like certain things, I wonder if he'll be more aggressive this time, knowing it's just so hard. Like you almost have to stay aggressive against DC. But Arlington obviously had been known for settling for field goals pretty much all year, and they've been able to now punch it in the red zone. So we talked about the DC defense and the Arlington offense. I want to kind of flip sides of the ball. The DC offense and how they might be unique. You talked about the Jay Gruden coaching tree in the West Coast and what Coach Hayes comes from. This DC offense, it's always felt to me all year like it's been unique. Like we talked in our interview about the air raids and what they do in Houston, what they do in Seattle, what they do in Vegas, Orlando, right? DC with Coach Keiss, they've always kind of taken a different approach, and it's kind of RPO heavy. What does DC do, and what can Arlington do on defense to kind of slow that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're going to have to play man coverage, and it's not a knock on Jordan, but DC is a running offense. They're going to run the football. If you can stop the run or eliminate the big runs, because when they get the runs that are 20-yard type runs, like they're a different offense when they're in that situation. I think as an Arlington defense, you have to go into this game with a mindset of, okay, if we lose, we'll lose by Jordan Ta'amu beating us with his arm. Like we'll take that chance, and that's not a knock on Jordan, but I think anybody in the league that has faced DC will tell you, like, hey, their running game is premier. All right, it's the top in the league, and you have to stop the run. If you don't stop the run, then you're in for a long night. And then it allows them to establish their RPO game. And now they're seeing man coverage. Now they got guys out wide that can run by people. So now you're playing press man. Even if you're playing off man, you're giving them slants. If you play press, now they're taking some go shots. And Jordan's done a really good job of hitting those when he's seen man coverage. So I think this DC offense is it's put up a ton of points all year long, and it's been huge for him for sure. I just be honest with you, Matt. I don't know if Arlington can really do enough on defense to really keep them in this game for 4 quarters. I really don't. And I know they played close last time, and it came down to overtime. But I think DC was in that mindset of, hey, we're already in. If we should get the first round at home, and maybe they just weren't themselves. But maybe Arlington comes out and plays different. But the DC offense right now is, I think, clicking, and I think they're going to be tough to stop. So,
Yeah, and you're right. Back in week 9, I was a pretty big point spread, and I just figured it was too big. It seemed to me like DC came out, they had a ton of defensive penalties. I think almost 40 yards in penalties on the first drive. They had weird stuff going on where they'd call a timeout on a 4th and 3 to get personnel in, and then coming out of the timeout, you still get a 12-man on the field, which is a nightmare. They had DPI after DPI holding. So there was a lot of chances in that game for Arlington to win. And you felt like Arlington was going full out there, and they still weren't able to do enough defensively. And, De'Aaron King, another guy that can kind of come in and pace Jordan a little bit. Touching on the Arlington defense, right? Just a little interesting here. They do lead the league in takeaways.
yeah.
And they have some vets like Will Hill back there, great player, former 2nd-round pick. Some injuries, but some good players on that side of the ball. When you guys were going into, obviously it was a while ago at this point, but when you guys were going into your matchup with Arlington, what was it like? What compared to DC's defense, like all the things that we're just talking about? Is there anything special that they do that DC should watch for, or can DC just play their game and operate in their game plan?
Yeah, I think DC just plays their game. Listen, I felt they were very basic. Arlington's defense, it was cover three week. They would mix in some quarters coverage in there. Every once in a while, they'd mix in Tampa 2, but it was easy to see I mean, their mic would just be start way back compared to the other two linebackers. So and they didn't blitz a lot. Checking back on notes, it was 25% of the time they blitzed. So it really wasn't a ton. They were a base 4-3 over team versus 11. Second down, I do remember second down is when they would blitz 5, but they would play man coverage. And even in our game against them, like right before halftime, I hit Darius Shepard on a deep corner. I saw they were in man coverage. We were in a 3-by-1 formation. Safety was cheating over. And so I'm like, all right, well, I can easily get to this. And so I feel like when they're in man coverage, they struggled against us. So maybe DC feels, hey, if they're in man coverage, we can take advantage of it because we got guys that can run outside as well. And DC has some bigger guys too, which I think Arlington struggles with bigger receivers. So, man, I just think it's a long, hard task for Arlington this weekend, and I just don't know. I think Arlington's, and I got a bunch of friends that play for Arlington, and I'm rooting for them. I think Will Clark's got to have a dominant game on the edge. I think they got to find ways to get pressure up front on DC's offense, but Arlington's defense has to play well as a whole.
Yeah, it's been really tough to hold that DC offense under 30. I guess my last question, AJ, if you were part of this game plan and, it was another crack at DC for you guys, obviously after week 3, you talked about, hey, we had our opportunities. It was just, we had a tight end slip. It's a pick 6. Other things that went on in the game where officials were still learning at that point and coming over and Anthony Beck doesn't know whether to challenge or not because you don't really know in week 3 if they're looking at it or not. Like that was unclear. We didn't know if it was a booth initiated review and you had to burn the challenge or you could hold on to it. Something that Coach Stoops did in week 9, the chains were off. And I don't know if you saw that, but
no, I didn't.
He lit up the official on a 4th and 1. DC, they blitzed and they ended up very close to the line to gain. And Arlington believed they had a first down. Coach Stoops went out and he looked at the chain and he was like, it should be a first down. It was a booth initiated review, and the call on the field stood that it was 4th down. By not challenging that, he then held on to his challenge for the final play of the game, where Sal Cannella was held by Santos Ramirez and Greg Williams was halfway to the shower, and they ended up extending that game and being able to play for the tie. So, yeah, back in week 3, there was a lot going on. You guys had him again, week 5? The 2 big runs.
Yep.
Right. So it's just these plays that can get you. So I guess my last question would be, like, you touched on a lot of it already, but if you were part of this game plan and had a chance to maybe do something differently against DC this time around, what would the main focuses be?
I think, us staying, I think if you're Arlington's offense, I think you got to have some RPOs in the game plan. I do think DC's linebackers are so aggressive to when they see run, they flow over the top. I think you got to have some RPOs, whether it's also under center. I think some type of counter runs to where you get them flowing one way and then we're coming back the other way. So use their aggressiveness against them. I think DC does so much from a secondary standpoint, showing one coverage, trying to run back and get into position post snap, to where if you're Arlington, you come up and we go on quick snaps and we say, hey, there's going to be some plays to where when we go on this quick snap, Luis, you're going to have to stand in there and take a shot, but there's going to be guys open because they're going to be out of position because they rely on the cadence so much of, set Blue 80, set hut, like on that second Blue 80 is when they're moving because they know the ball is about to be snapped. So if we go up and just set hut and now they're out of position, I think you can get some big plays that way too. And then also on top of that, you got to use dummy cadence. You got to come up and you got to make their front four, and especially their defensive ends. You got to have Bellamy. Get in Bellamy's head. Bellamy's a great player, but he is aggressive and he's smart and knows the cadence over a period of time. So he will try to time up the cadence and get a jump on your tackle. So use the dummy cadence to your advantage. You can't. The biggest thing that I think we did that really hurt us was when we had a positive play, even in the first and the second matchup against DC. It was like as soon as we had a positive play, we had something that brought us right back. We had some type of false start. We had some type of hold, something that made us get right back behind the sticks. And against DC, you got to stay in front of the sticks. You can't be playing in second and long, third and long situations because you play into their hand. And they're just going to play soft coverage. They're going to rally to the ball like they do. They're great defense in that aspect. And they're going to make tackles. They usually don't miss a ton of tackles as a defense. So I think using those key things, cadence, quick snaps against them, and then RPOs, counters, but also taking shots because DC, like you said, DC has had some games to where they have quite a bit of holds in the secondary. And you got to be willing to try to take those chances and say, hey, if we do turn it over, taking a deep shot, maybe it's some type of punt, but we also probably get a defensive pass interference and get the ball moving that way. And then I think when you do that, you allow DC such a high energy team from a defensive standpoint to where if you can get them to start to argue amongst each other, I think you get in their head and they play a little out of themselves in that aspect. So I think as Arlington, you can't come in this game scared. If you turn the ball over, you turn the ball over, but you got to be willing to take some chances and do some different things and put pressure on DC in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. They cannot live in third and long. Obviously,
No.
That's something that a lot of pretty much every team that goes for, but especially DC because breaking down, some of their film, they brought 7 at times. So they do get really super aggressive there on third down. Well, AJ, I wish ESPN would see this and they would do kind of like a live, like, oh, AJ's going to come in and we're going to have commentary during the game, man. Maybe
that
next
would be sweet.
Yeah, I know they do it for the College Football National Championship where they'll have different casts on different channels. And one of them is, just sitting down, breaking down the game, kind of like the Mannings do. But yeah, that'd be cool. Thanks for coming on again, giving us your breakdown. Obviously, you saw DC twice. You saw Arlington once. You know these players. You lived with them in the hub. You know their tendencies well. And great insight, AJ, yet again. I'm sure people will be looking for some of the things that you said to happen in this game and wondering, like we said, Arlington has a 6.5 point underdog here. Even if they play their best game, can they beat DC? I think that if Arlington plays their best game, DC will have to probably score 30 because I think Perez is capable. As we saw against Houston, nobody expected that. Right off the bat, They go up. It was 14 or 15 to nothing. Right away. And Houston offense tailing off there at the end, not really able to come back. So, yeah, Luis has definitely made the best of everybody around him. And you see guys like Sal Cannella and Lawan Winningham and some of these guys are starting to break out. So, yeah, it'll definitely be fun. You definitely gave us a great insight. Thanks, AJ. Appreciate that, man.
Of course. Appreciate you, Matty.